Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I will talk to you about managing in turbulent times. We all have had the pandemic now for over a year. We face some very tough times. We're still facing some very tough times, and then we don't know when it's going to end. Nonetheless, there's one thing we can do to make a change. Um, and I'll talk in the perspective of corporate governance today, because I think a lot of meaningful work can be done by corporates to mitigate the suffering which is all around. First and foremost, this is the time for corporate reset. By reset, I mean restructuring. The first thing which has to be done by corporations across the world is to get into a dichotomous board, a policy board and an executive board. Now, in various Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Finland, and so on and so forth, this has been in vogue for 2-3 decades, and it has actually proved to be very efficacious from the point of view of empowering the stakeholder. Which is the solution today? To face the pandemic, to tackle the pandemic and face the future, we need to empower the stakeholders. This is the solution. And how do you empower the stakeholders? Via the tenets of compassionate capitalism and inclusive growth. Now, fundamentally, when you have a dichotomous board, it leads to a separation of powers. Policy making is with the policy making board, and all executive action is with the managerial board. This way, there are no conflicts of interest and no conflicted transactions as well. Now, research has shown in over 1,000 companies that this has proved to be extremely efficacious, and ejusdem generis across geographies, corporations have to adopt this format. Now, let's be clear, this is the pandemic and theoretical constructs mean little to the employee who is suffering, to the vendor who is suffering. Theoretical constructs hardly mean anything. And so it's high time that companies, of course, any company resorts to its corporate governance doctrine, which is some of which are 20, 30 pages long, and I mean, they're actually altruistic in nature, but hardly anything of it is implemented. So what we need to do when we have this kind of a dichotomous board, the policy board ideates a lot in these matters, and the managerial board has no option but to implement. The managerial board's role is only implementation. They have nothing to do with policy, and the policy board has nothing to do with implementation. This way, the sphere domains are clear and lucid, and both sections of the board will know what they have to do. Now, fundamentally, today we have a whole bunch of disgruntled employees and vendors. Now, we need to do something about it in pragmatic terms. Most corporations have not been sensitive to this, and fundamentally, adharma anywhere is dharma nowhere. In simpler words, injustice anywhere is justice nowhere. We need to ensure that the marginalized sections of employees and vendors are taken care of. And I believe from the realms of political governance, governments across the world should provide for immense tax breaks to corporations so that they would be able to take care of the marginalized sections, which are we employees and vendors. Now, having said this, let me move on to another important aspect of governance in these turbulent times, and that is of envisioning. The policy boards have the role of envisioning, and by envisioning, what they need to do is to clearly work out 5, 10, 15-year plans for the company, which are A, pragmatic, and B, based on research. Now, the concept of individualized corporation is very simple. It means that every employee and vendor is an individualized value addition center, and this is the best time to implement that. Employees will be willing to give all that is required, and so would vendors. So, individualized corporations motivate the employees, shore up the top lines for companies, and without a doubt ensures that the company goes to the next level. And this is part of the vision statement. And as a concomitant feature, one needs to have continuous learning programs so that employees and vendors are constantly up to date with the latest in technologies and stuff like that so that they can use it for the good of the company. And finally, zero tolerance to corruption and cronyism ought to be part of the basic structure of the vision statement, because the pandemic has taught us all one thing, that anything which is done wrongly has its consequences. And this has been a time for many of us to reflect. And I think that the best thing that companies should do is to ensure that the core part of their vision statement is dovetailed towards ensuring zero tolerance to corruption and cronyism. Now, which actually leads me to another important coordinate of governance, which is of efficiencies. Whilst individualized corporations is something which they all have to work on, one core aspect which should not be overlooked is that of competencies. Now, competencies are of two kinds. One is core competency and the other is distinctive competency. Now, employees should be edified on what the two competencies mean. Core competency is essentially all about growth. Core competency has to be treasured. Core competency are those unique features in a company which makes for all the difference. Distinct competencies just means proficiency in an area or two, and many in the industry vertical can have that. So whilst it is recognized as a competency, it ranks much lower than core competency. So this is the time for boards to strategize in such a way that they can enhance core competencies across the board in their corporation, which leads me to another and a very crucial point, which is evolving the mindset of servant leadership. The pandemic has taught us all one thing, that we are all equal. Equality is the name of the game, and equality ought to be the name of the game going forward. So servant leadership simply means that men and women of integrity and honor are at the helm, and such outstanding personalities would always put the corporation and everyone else before them. Well, we should take an exemplar here, two exemplars here from the world of political governance, because both these exemplars are outstanding, and both were from ancient India. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and Krishna Deva Raya are two of the best exemplars of political governance using the format of servant leadership. The subjects were the raison d'etre of their existence. Likewise, boards would have to ensure that the raison d'etre of their existence is the stakeholders. The stakeholder empowerment is the crucial name of the game, and the format of servant leadership is the best way to bring forth that, effectuate that into reality. Which leads me to two other important coordinates, both with the managerial boards. The first step of the managerial board is centric to edifying themselves about the vision statement. What is the vision statement of the company as laid out by the policy board? They have to know this in lucid, clear, categorical terms. Once they know that this is the way we have to go forward, the next step is developing a critical mission statement which is dovetailed to achieve that vision. Now, this alignment is crucial for the success of the company. If there is any discord here, or if there is any, and the alignment is not proper, it would lead not to achieving targeted objectives, but to something much short of that. So this is something very crucial. Please understand, the mission has to be developed in such a way that the vision will be effectuated into reality. Now, for this, we require really competent, very, very competent members in the managerial board, which includes the managing director and the CEO and so on and so forth. Again, men and women of honesty and integrity will have to man these positions, and the mantra they'll have to follow is management by objectives, objectives as delineated by the mission to achieve the vision. Which leads me to the next coordinate, which is about making mid-course corrections. Now, even in normal times, whenever a plan is being worked on, there could be a number of market forces which would come up and which would make you to change course. So making mid-course corrections is a very crucial part of the managerial board's work, and they have to ensure that they do so perfectly. Let me give you an example here. One of the most gory scenarios I've had in India is that recently, maybe 8-9 months back, when a whole bunch of migrant laborers who worked in the southern states of India had to walk on rail tracks for hundreds of miles to reach destinations in the north of India and Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. In my very humble opinion, this is a perfect example of where corporate governance had gone wrong. Had the boards been sensitized, had the boards followed compassionate capitalism, had they believed in inclusive growth, they would have ensured that these migrant laborers are taken well care of here, and in the process, they would have also ensured that they have those very employees forever. They missed the golden opportunity both to serve the employees and to work on a grander vision. Now, this mistake should be learned, and corporate governance and political governance are the face and the obverse of a coin. There's no point depending only on political governance. We also have to do a lot of work in corporate governance to ensure that society's requirements are met, which actually now leads me to the final coordinate of Enlightened board. The first four coordinates, which is of a corporate egalitarianism, envisioning efficiencies, evolving the mindset of servant leadership, are all about developing foresight. And the last two, which is on the managerial board's functionalities, which is about effectuating on the vision by a mission program and by making mid-course corrections astutely. What we require is focus. When foresight and focus work in tandem, we have an enlightened board. And an enlightened board is the surest way to ensure that stakeholders are empowered. And this will create sustainable organizations. This will create organizations which serve the needs of the people, which is in their highest and best interests, and in the process would be creating much value for themselves and their nations. Thank you so very much. Till I see you guys next time, take care. Take very good care of yourselves.